Chapter 47, The Board is Set. The Westerlands, 294 AC. Gerion. Riding to Casterly Rock had become a chore. It wasn't the journey itself that weighed on him, but the realization that once he arrived, he would only have a short time with Joy before he had to set off for Castamere again. The castle was coming along nicely, but it would be another year before he felt comfortable enough for Joy to live there. Lately, he found himself questioning whether that was truly for the best. He was increasingly torn between his selfish desire to be with his daughter and what was best for her. As much as he wished for Joy to be by his side, Castamere wasn't the right place for her upbringing. In time, the town he was building and the surrounding lands would be suitable for her. But for now, she needed to be with family, to cherish the happy moments at the Rock. As he reached the castle, he cleared his mind and focused on the few days he would have with her, even if it meant being close to that demon cat of hers. "Milord, welcome back," the stable lad said as he took his horse. "Aye, it's good to be back. Look after her for me, will you, lad?" Gerion replied, handing the boy a few coppers. "I will, thanks, milord." He walked to the lift and took it up to the family wing. The ride was as uncomfortable as usual, and he longed for a hot bath. But he intended to see Joy first. Once she knew he was at the Rock, he wouldn't get a moment's peace until he did. Arriving at the family floor, he stepped out and wondered where she might be. As he scanned the area for a servant to ask, he spotted his sister walking quickly toward him. "And not a moment too soon," she said as she reached him. "What's going on, sister? Have you not heard about your nephew's folly? What's Tyrion done now?" He chuckled. "Not Tyrion, Jaime. He's gone and gotten married," Jenna said, her voice filled with frustration. Caught completely by surprise, he could hardly process the news. Gerion stood there, mouth agape, trying to process the news. Jaime was married? But wasn't that what Jenna wanted? "That's a good thing, right?" he asked, searching for reassurance. "Aye, it is," Jenna replied, shaking her head. "Though the damn fool went and did it in front of a tree. We'll need to throw him a proper wedding and invite everyone who's important." "Tree?" he asked, focusing on the one detail that didn't make sense. "Did you even read my ravens?" she snapped, her frustration evident. "I've been busy, you know," he said defensively. "By the 7, give me patience. Jaime has married Lady Daisy Mormont in a ceremony in front of the old gods of those damn northerners, at Winterfell of all places." In that moment, Gerion regretted not paying more attention to those ravens. Jaime marrying a northern lady would undoubtedly make waves throughout the 7 kingdoms. He could only imagine how Cersei would react. Oh, to be a fly on the wall during that confrontation, though even the walls might not be safe from his niece's fury. As he tried to grapple with this news, he heard a small voice call out to him, shattering any hope Jenna had of getting him to engage in the conversation. "Papa!" Joy exclaimed, running toward him. "Hello, princess. How is my favorite girl today?" he asked, bending down to greet her. "I'm good, Papa. How long will you stay?" "A little while." "Where's Balerion?" he inquired, looking around for the mischievous cat. "Balon saw a mouse, Papa, so he ran after it," she replied, and Gerion chuckled, thanking the gods for the distraction. That cat was a menace. "Come on, princess. Let's eat, and you can tell me all about your lessons." "No, lessons are no fun. Me and Balon have fun stories, Papa," she said, giggling. "Balon and I, Joy," Jenna corrected, glancing at her. "Really, Auntie? What do you and Balon do?" his daughter asked, her curiosity piqued. Jenna merely sighed and walked away. "Never mind, Auntie Jenna. Why don't you tell me your stories, princess?" he encouraged, smiling at Joy. He lifted Joy in his arms, and she spent the rest of the day sharing stories about her adventures with the cat. The way she could turn terrorizing the servants into everyday fun made him laugh, especially since he knew there was no malice in her actions. It wasn't that she intended to frighten the girls, they simply made the mistake of annoying the demon cat. As Joy put it, "Ballon mine, Papa, they no touch." After they ate, he tucked her into bed, reading her a story. He couldn't help but feel like a poor substitute for Jon, but thankfully, she had stopped asking when he would return. It wouldn't be for another moon or two anyway. He knew the poor boy would never be allowed to leave again, considering how Joy behaved when he himself left. He hoped both Jon and young Loras were doing well. He had received a letter from Jon a couple of moons ago and looked forward to seeing them both again. Apparently, the next time they would meet would be for a wedding. So, forsaking the longed-for bath, he walked to his nephew's solar to speak with him and his sister, knowing she would join them as soon as he arrived. Knocking on the door, he entered to find Tyrion busy with paperwork. He poured himself a glass of wine and took a seat. "Uncle, how fares you?" Tyrion asked. "Good, Tyrion, though I hate these trips," he replied. I can imagine. Before Aunt Jenna arrives, I need to talk to you about something important." "Very well. I've received a report that someone intends to steal one of the gold shipments." "A report? From who?" "A man named Elaine that Jaime put me in touch with in King's Landing." "You trust this man?" I do. But that's not all, Uncle. It's the person planning it that will shock you." "Who?" "Gregor Clegane." Tyrion began to explain why he suspected Clegane and how they could deal with the situation. Together, they devised a plan. He wasn't entirely sure about it and felt it was far too risky, but Tyrion assured him it would work, so he let his doubts go. Before they could delve deeper into the conversation, his sister arrived. Her expression revealed her discontent as she took a seat, and they began discussing Jaime's marriage and its implications for the West. Later that night, as he soaked in the bath, he couldn't help but chuckle. Jaime had truly surprised them all. He had always thought his nephew would never marry, yet here he was, clearly smitten with the woman of his dreams. Gerion smiled with happiness for Jaime, but soon his mood darkened as he thought of his own loss. Joy should be here, she deserved to know her mother. In a fit of anger, he threw a glass against the wall. Damn Tullis. Meanwhile, on Tarth in 293 AC, Brienne had returned from the tourney nearly 2 weeks ago. She felt bored, but more than that, she felt a twinge of betrayal. After losing her fight against Jon Snow, he had talked to her about her future. Although she didn't have many plans, he mentioned the possibility of her squiring at Casterly Rock. "There are many fine knights there, Brienne. Given your talent, you could learn so much from them," he had said. "No knight would take a lady to squire, Jon," she replied. "I beg to differ. But if that doesn't work out, I'm sure Lord Jaime could take you on, if we don't find a suitable knight. Doesn't he already have both you and Lord Loras?" He does. But who says what a squire's duties are? Isn't it the lessons themselves that matter most?" "It is, Jon, but do you really think I could?" "I do. Just imagine what it would be like to learn from a swordsman like that." So she had returned, filled with dreams of training with Jaime Lannister and spending her days alongside Jon and Loras. She considered them friends, only to find they were not. Each day, she awaited a letter, an offer, but with each passing day, disappointment grew. Still, she trained diligently, trying not to let her spirits sink too low. She should have. Brienne had come to realize that, like the other boys she had met, Jon and Loras would never be her friends. That night at dinner, the conversation with her father felt awkward. She was still upset, though she tried her best to conceal it. Just as they were finishing, a servant entered and spoke to her father. They cleared the table, and her father asked her to accompany him to meet a guest who had arrived. As they made their way to her father's solar, Brienne wondered who would come at such an hour. Once inside, they took their seats, and a few moments later, a man was ushered in. "My lord, my lady," he said, bowing slightly, "forgive me for the lateness of the hour. My ship was delayed due to bad weather, and the letter I carry was conveyed to me as most urgent." He handed the letter to her father. "Who sent the letter?" her father inquired. "I do not know, my lord. I was simply asked to deliver it." "If you'll forgive me, I'd like to catch the tide," the man replied. "Of course," her father said, and the man departed. Brienne watched as her father opened the letter. A smile spread across his face as he handed it to her. "Lord Selwyn," it read. "My squire, Jon Snow, spoke fondly of your daughter and her skills with a sword. He has recommended to me, and I take his recommendation seriously, that with the proper training, there is no limit to the level she could reach. Given my own propensity for martial activities and my squire's recommendation, I would like to offer Lady Brienne the opportunity to train under myself or a worthy knight. I understand, my lord, that this is a strange offer. Therefore, I suggest that she join us as my ward. Her safety, well-being, virtue, and good health will be guaranteed by myself and my house. I give you my solemn vow, my lord, that she shall be treated with the respect and courtesy due her standing, and that I will have no man of any rank treat her discourteously. As I am presently on my way to the north, I only ask that, should you accept, you hold her travel or your own until my return. I expect to be back within 6 or more moons, and a letter should arrive around that time. Should you wish to come?" Brienne felt a flicker of hope as she listened to her father's voice reading the letter, her heart racing at the prospect of a new beginning. "See where I would have Lady Brienne stay. Should you have any further questions about me or my squire, I look forward to seeing you at Casterly Rock. Lord Jaime Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, Lord Paramount of the Westerlands, Warden of the West." As Brienne stared at the letter, disbelief washed over her. If she had been alone, she knew the tears would have streamed down her face, but she held them back. He had spoken the truth, he hadn't lied or misled her. Everything he had said to her in person, he had conveyed to his lord as well. They considered her skilled, talented enough to be trained by Jaime Lannister. She glanced at her father, waiting for his response. Despite the enticing offer, doubt gnawed at her. She worried he would reject it. Even though he had a reputation as a swordsman, she understood how others perceived him, and she feared her father would be reluctant to allow his daughter to be trained by the Kingslayer. "My dear, I do not know what to make of this," he said, looking at her with uncertainty. "Father? I appreciate the offer, and I have no doubt about the truth of the words, but would it be shameful to be trained by this man?" Brienne took a deep breath. "It may not be Lord Jaime, father, it could be any knight. But look at Jon Snow. He's Lord Stark's natural son. Surely, if Eddard Stark has no problem with his son being Lord Jaime's squire, then we cannot turn our noses up at the same offer. You have a point, daughter. Is this what you wish?" "It is, father." "Then so be it. I've not denied you anything up until now, and I won't start with something you desire. However, I will be coming with you. I want to see for myself before I leave my daughter alone in the West, even with guards." "Thank you, father," she said, her heart swelling with happiness. A few moons later, when the letter arrived, she was filled with excitement. Not only would they be going to the Rock to meet Lord Jaime, but now they had been invited to a wedding, an event they surely wouldn't have been invited to without Lord Jaime's offer. Simply put, they were far too lesser a house to expect such an honor. Brienne was excited to be invited to the wedding of the Lord of the West. While she didn't care much for such festivities, she looked forward to them for more than just the spectacle and feasting. It felt like the right time. She packed her chest with her most important belongings, her armor, her clothing, and even her prettiest dress for the wedding. Then she waited for the servants to take her things down to the ship. They would sail to King's Landing, where they would board one of the large Lannister ships bound for Lannisport, and from there, ride to Casterly Rock. Over the past few nights, she had studied the map her father kept, memorizing the route in her mind. "My lady, we're ready to go," a servant announced. She rose to leave, taking one last look around her room. A twinge of sadness washed over her as she wondered when she would return, but it was tempered by her excitement about seeing the West, Lannisport and Casterly Rock. She eagerly anticipated learning from Lord Jaime, Loras, and Jon Snow, and she looked forward to spending time with her friends. In King's Landing, in the year 294 AC, Cersei sat in her chambers when the news arrived. A servant rushed in, handing her a note. She had been in such a good mood, but that changed as she read the message. A mistake, a joke, she thought. Surely, someone was trying to have fun at her expense. Well, they would soon learn what happened when they crossed the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. With that, she stormed out of her room, Ser Barristan following closely behind. She marched down the corridors and into the king's quarters, where she found him seated, half-drunk as usual. Jon Arryn, the old fool, was rambling on, and she could see the displeasure on her face reflected in his. Where's his little shadow? She wondered, relieved she didn't have to look at the smug master of coin. Why Jon Arryn was even there, she didn't know, but she kept her emotions in check. With a smile, she handed the note to her husband. He took it, focused briefly, and then let out a laugh. Robert handed the note to Jon Arryn, who at least had the sense to look troubled by its contents. "So, the Kingslayer found himself a she-bear to warm his nights," Robert said, swallowing some wine. "You can't mean to allow this?" Cersei said, her anger rising. "Allow what?" her oaf of a husband replied, bemused. "A Lord Paramount marrying a savage." She almost lost her composure. "He can marry who he damn well pleases." "I'm not his father," Robert retorted, laughing even louder. "Oh, I can only imagine the look on the old lion's face if he were still with us." He chuckled more and refilled his cup. "And you?" Cersei turned to Jon Arryn. "My queen," he responded, unsure. "Have you nothing to say about this? A heathen northerner marrying into the richest house in Westeros?" She saw the hesitation in the falcon's eyes. He was on the verge of speaking, but her husband interrupted. What would Jon have to say? "Your brother is a grown man, he's free to marry who he pleases. Now, leave us. I'll hear no more of this nonsense." Fuming, Cersei stormed from the room and back to her own. The vase was the first to go, followed by the water jug, and then she turned her fury on the linens of the bed. Tears streamed down her face, and she lost track of time as she raged. When she finally collapsed onto the bed, she cried harder, mourning the fact that he was supposed to be hers. He was her other half, they were meant to be married. A lioness, not a bear, was what her brother truly needed. When she awoke, it was already late. Darkness had fallen, and she had been left alone since returning to her rooms. She called for a servant and requested wine, unsure of where her earlier bottle had gone. Had she drunk it all? Had they taken it away? No, they wouldn't dare. When the wine arrived, she sat in her chair while the servants changed the torn linen and removed the broken glass and pottery. If she had looked around the room, she would have seen the way they glanced at her, but she was too lost in her thoughts to notice. Cersei felt the pity and fear on the faces of the servants around her, but she was too lost in her thoughts to notice. Once they finished their tasks and left the room, she took a glass of wine and walked over to her bed. Lying down, she envisioned Jaime's handsome face and firm body, a thrill of excitement coursing through her. But before she could dwell on those thoughts, another image intruded, her other half kissing a nameless, faceless woman. She could see Jaime laughing as he danced with someone who wasn't her. Tears filled her eyes as she drifted off to sleep. "My queen, can I get you anything?" a voice called out, pulling her from her thoughts. She turned to see one of her servants, a small dark-haired girl whose name escaped her. "No, I'm fine." "Why are you here?" she asked, studying the girl. My queen, you called for me to help you dress, the girl replied, looking at her in confusion. Oh, that's right, Cersei said, allowing the girl to assist her. As she left the room, she noticed Sir Richard Horp standing guard. It struck her as odd. She was sure Ser Barristan had been there when she fell asleep. Making her way down the corridor, she heard Myrcella speaking to Tommen and paused when she caught their mention of her name day. Confusion washed over her. Her name day was moons away. Deciding to check on her sweet girl, she opened the door to find her two children sitting on the floor, playing with a brown and white cat. She shook her head. Wasn't Tommen's cat brown? My loves, how are you today? She asked. Fine, mother. We're looking forward to the celebration, Myrcella replied with a smile. Celebration? For your name day, mother. Oh, that's a long way away, sweetling, she said, a smile spreading across her face, touched by her children's thoughtfulness. Mother, it's tonight, Myrcella said, looking at her oddly. No, that was wrong. It was moons away. Her little girl must be mistaken, right? But as she glanced at Sir Richard, he didn't appear to think anything was amiss. Could it be that she was the one who was mistaken? With a forced smile, she said her goodbyes to her children. Cersei made her way to seek out Pycelle. Though she despised dealing with the old fool, his loyalty was unwavering, loyalty to her and her alone now that her father was gone. Halfway to his chambers, she paused. She was a queen, why was she going to him? With a determined turn, she walked back to her room and sent a servant to fetch the maester. As she entered her chambers, she surveyed her surroundings. The colors seemed off. Were the walls always this yellow? Hadn't they once been red? Where were her paintings and tapestries? There were no lions on the walls, no images of Casterly Rock. Instead, Storm's End was depicted, and stags were everywhere. Black and yellow replaced the crimson and gold. This wasn't right, she would get to the bottom of this soon enough. My queen, it's good to see you looking better, Pycelle said as he entered. Better? Cersei wondered what he meant. Yes, my queen. You look far more like your old self than you have in over a moon. A moon? What was he talking about? There was nothing wrong with her. She hadn't been ill, had she? She searched his expression for any sign of dishonesty, any hint that he was trying to make her doubt herself, but she found nothing. Instead, he smiled at her, and despite herself, she smiled back, unsure of why. Maester, it's strange. I find myself questioning when my name day celebrations are, she said, her voice shaking. My queen, they are tonight. His Grace has been planning them for the past moon. He has, she replied, surprised. Indeed, your Grace. She dismissed him and walked to the bed, searching for something, anything, that could make sense of it all. Something had changed, and she couldn't begin to fathom what it was. She rummaged through her vanity and found her small chest. Opening it, she discovered two crumpled notes that had been straightened out. She examined them both. The first took her breath away, while the second sent her into a tailspin. One announced the betrothal of Jaime to a Mormont girl and the announcement that they had been married in the north, with plans to marry again at Casterly Rock, felt like a cruel twist of fate. This couldn't be right, Jaime wouldn't do this to her. He loved her. Suddenly, the room began to spin, and dizziness overtook her. She collapsed onto the bed, unconscious. In her dreams, memories rushed back. She was a young girl, practicing swordplay with her twin brother. They raced through the vaults of the rock, hiding from each other and laughing with joy. Time shifted, and she found herself slightly older, cradling her brother in her arms. Their faces were mere inches apart as their lips met, igniting a whirlwind of emotions. She felt his fingers on her skin, her breath quickening as they shared an intimate moment for the first time. But then, her heart shattered as she watched him ride away from the rock. She saw him throw her out, naked, from his room, her cries echoing in the silence, her pleas falling on deaf ears. The scene changed, and she was at a tourney, watching him joust. His golden armor gleamed in the sunlight as he unseated opponent after opponent, drawing closer to inevitable victory. When he rode over to her, placing a garland on his lance, her heart raced with anticipation. But then, in stunned silence, she watched as he passed her by and approached a little blonde girl. Who was she? Why was Jaime moving toward her? No, it couldn't be, he was supposed to crown her, not some other girl. She focused on the girl, noticing the blonde hair and green eyes that resembled her own, like Myrcella. Could it be? The images swirled rapidly in her mind. Jaime was kissing someone else, a girl who wasn't her. He was smiling, while a septon read the words of a wedding ceremony. Panic surged through her as she witnessed the scene unfold, the woman, the little girl being crowned, all of it repeating in a dizzying cycle. He was smiling at someone else, holding someone else, marrying someone else. The girl with the blonde hair and green eyes beamed as she held the flowers, her flowers. Jenna woke up crying, her fists pounding against the bed. It was supposed to be me. She was supposed to be our daughter, she screamed. Casterly Rock, 294 AC. When the Raven arrived, Jenna could hardly believe the news. The fact that Jaime was getting married was one thing, but marrying a northern lady was something else entirely. She knew there would be issues with some of the lords who had hoped for a different match. Yet, she found she didn't care. Her nephew, who had shown no signs of wanting to marry, was finally doing so. He would continue their line, which was crucial for the future of their house. She frowned as she read about the northern wedding, but at least he was marrying under the light of the seven. She had sent out invitations, even to the king and queen, despite Tyrion and Gerion's reluctance. While she doubted they would attend, not inviting them would cause problems. She knew her niece would see it as a snub, and while she would rather not have that fat oaf in her home, he was still the king. So, she had prepared. She ordered the finest wines from the arbor and hired the best bards and minstrels for the wedding feast. At first, she had considered hosting a tourney, but she dismissed the idea. Then, when Kevin brought it up, she decided to hold one after all. It wouldn't be huge, but large enough to make it worthwhile. Jenna had ordered the finest fabrics for her boys, her brothers, and her nephew. Now, she and Joy were being measured, not just for their dresses for the wedding, but for a whole new wardrobe. Ouch! Joy exclaimed. Are you all right, Joy? Jenna asked. Lady did an ouch, Auntie, the little girl said, scrunching her nose. Well, we'll be done soon, my love. When is the party, Auntie? Joy asked eagerly. One more moon, sweetling. Too long, Joy replied, shaking her head. John will be back for the party, Joy. He may have a present for you. Oh, the girl said softly. Jenna shook her head, the girl had really missed John. At first, Jenna had felt terribly about Jaime's absence, but over time, it had morphed into a sense of annoyance. Where once she would feel excitement at the sound of his name and wonder when he would return, now she found herself indifferent. This was far better than the anger that had consumed her a couple of moons ago. Jenna knew that once she actually saw him again, her feelings would likely shift, but his prolonged absence had hurt her deeply. All done, the seamstress announced, and Joy's face lit up as a girl entered, carrying sweets for her. Joy's fitting had taken much less time. Although she had put on some weight over the years, she had maintained her shape for quite a while, and her clothes hardly needed measuring. Still, she wanted to look her best, which was why she had come in person instead of simply placing an order. Besides, there was no way Joy would have allowed herself to be fitted without her. It had been a challenge to get Joy to leave their cat at the rock, but eventually, she had done so, albeit reluctantly. Once they finished with the fittings, Jenna and her guards left the seamstress's shop to head over to Kevin's before making their way back to the rock. She hadn't visited Lannisport in a while and had been especially cautious since Oberyn and his brood arrived. So far, they had behaved, but the Viper's reputation preceded him, keeping her on high alert. Kevin's residence buzzed with activity as usual. Her brother had embraced his role as Lord of Lannisport as if he had been born to it, and Jenna felt an immense pride in his accomplishments. The city was thriving, the fleet was nearly as large as the one they had lost 5 years earlier, and with the addition of those monstrous pinnacle ships, it wouldn't be long before the Lannisters ruled the waves. As soon as Joy spotted Martin and Willem, she dashed off, her hair flying loose behind her. Jenna chuckled at the sight, watching yet another ribbon fall from her hair. The ones she received from Jon and Loras were the only ones she would keep. After sending the guards to ensure her niece and nephews were safe, she felt a sense of anticipation for the day ahead. Well protected, Jenna set out in search of her brother. She found him and Lancel poring over paperwork in his solar. "Aunt Jenna," Lancel said politely as she entered. "Nephew," she replied with a nod. "Lancel, why don't you go get some refreshments for me and your aunt?" Kevin suggested. Lancel nodded eagerly and dashed off. "How have you been, sister?" Kevin asked. "Good, busy though, this damn wedding." "Well, at least he's married," Kevin chuckled, knowing the trouble she had faced trying to find him and Tyrion a bride. "Will they be here on time?" she inquired. "They will. I've sent the Lion's Roar to meet them." "The Tyrells?" "I sent the Lion's Mane." "Any word from our niece?" Jenna asked, but he shook his head. "Probably for the best." "Aye. How are the Dornish behaving?" she continued. "Well, the brothel is busy," he said with a chuckle. "It's true then?" "Every night. How he manages it, I have no idea." "Any idea why they've come?" Jenna asked, recalling that Tyrion hadn't been able to find out more than that they wished to speak with Jaime. "No, but we're watching them, and they've mostly been well behaved." They chatted for a few more minutes before Lancel returned with some food. Jenna ate, appreciating the fare from Kevin's kitchens, which was far better than what she'd find at any tavern. Once finished, and after stopping by to say hello to Dorna, she left in search of her niece. She found Joy and her nephews playing some odd game. Calling Joy to her, she bid her nephews goodbye, and once the carriage was ready, they set off for the Rock. The journey was quick, and she was relieved it was still light when they arrived. They took the lift to the family wing, and as soon as they stepped off, he was there waiting for them, as if he knew they were coming. Jenna looked at him, his beady yellow eyes staring back at her. He had been better lately, at least having stopped scratching her, though the servants remained wary, a sentiment that couldn't be said for her niece. "Balon, I'm back." "I missed you," Joy said, hugging the cat tightly. "Joy, we'll be having dinner soon." "Perhaps we should leave Balerion where he is," Jenna replied, trying to reason with her niece. "No, Auntie. Balon is hungry." "He'll be good, won't you, Balon?" "Now come on, we're going to play first," Joy exclaimed, racing down the hall. Jenna shrugged. There was no point in arguing, it simply wasn't worth the fight. Once again, she cursed Jon Snow for bringing that troublesome cat into their lives. Turning away, she headed toward her rooms, hoping Aemon was elsewhere. She'd much prefer to deal with the demon cat than her foolish husband. High Garden, 294 AC. Marjorie sat in the garden, having lunch with her grandmother. Lately, she found herself increasingly bored. Since returning from King's Landing, her days had settled into a monotonous routine. She missed the excitement of her adventures there, the sense of purpose she felt in her work. Here, it was just papers and organizing tasks that others could easily handle. In King's Landing, she could see the impact of their efforts, witnessing firsthand how people benefited from their work. But here, it was hard to connect with the words on parchment. Though she had tried to contribute more in High Garden, the reality was that even the poor here were in far better shape than those elsewhere. people didn't go hungry, they had warm places to sleep. Yes, there were orphans, and she spent time with them, but they were much better cared for than those in Flea Bottom. It felt like she was just spinning her wheels, accomplishing little. She also hadn't heard from Jon or Loras in ages. She knew they had been traveling, and letters were hard to come by, but she had hoped they would write more often, especially Jon. "Are you feeling well, sweetling?" her grandmother asked, breaking into her thoughts. "I am, grandmother, just bored," her grandmother finished, and Marjorie giggled. "Yes." Just then, a servant entered, carrying a note. Marjorie watched intently as her grandmother read it, anticipation building as she waited to see if she would be made privy to its contents. It took a moment before Marjorie's grandmother finally spoke, but when she did, Marjorie felt a thrill of excitement. "It seems we may have found a cure for our boredom, my dear." "Grandmother? We're going on a little journey." "Where to?" Marjorie asked, her curiosity piqued. "Lannisport. It seems we're going to a wedding, Marjorie." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Marjorie needed to make sure she packed her finest clothes, which, much to her father's insistence, meant buying a few new outfits. She also wanted to purchase gifts, but she decided to wait until they reached Old Town, especially since she noticed a lack of options around her. The thought of the wedding itself made the days fly by. She had hardly paid attention to the news that Jaime Lannister was betrothed. It had come on a day when she wasn't feeling well, and somehow, it hadn't registered in her mind. A betrothal meant a wedding, and a wedding involving the Lord Paramount of the West was a grand occasion. Her family would have to attend. It all slipped by her until the letter arrived with the invitation. A wedding at Casterly Rock would be a magnificent event to witness. Her aunt's wedding in Old Town had been grand, and the Lannisters would surely try to outdo it. But what truly excited her was the thought of seeing her brother again, of seeing Jon again. It had been many moons since their last meeting, and she had expected it to be many more, but now it was less than one moon away. "Come, Marjorie, we'll be late," her mother called as the last of their chests were loaded. "I'm ready, Mama." "This is so exciting, isn't it? To think they're sending one of those large ships to meet us in Old Town," her mother said, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "I know, Grandmother is most pleased." "Well, we know she's not the most pleasant traveler," her mother giggled. "Mother," Marjorie replied, feigning outrage before joining in on the laughter. Eventually, everything was loaded, and they climbed into the carriage that would take them to the boat. They were off on an adventure. Traveling by ship rather than overland cut their journey to Old Town in half. The river vessel was much more comfortable, allowing them to carry more luxuries, or essentials, as her grandmother had put it. For Marjorie, everything felt fresh and new. She had barely been a babe the last time she traveled along the Mander. Eager to savor every moment, she even leaned out the carriage window, much to her grandmother's annoyance. "Close those covers, child, or are you trying to give me a chill?" her grandmother chided shortly after they set off. "She's just excited, Olenna," her mother chimed in. In the end, Marjorie complied, closing the window covers as requested and settling back to enjoy the ride. It didn't take them long to reach the ship, and despite her father's chaotic attempts to organize their departure, the captain kept them on schedule. They set sail right on time. Marjorie stood on the deck, watching as the ship carved its way downstream, relishing the gentle wind that danced through her hair. It wasn't until dusk began to settle that she ventured below deck. They would spend a few days in Old Town before the Lannister ship arrived, and then they would be in Lannisport within 2 weeks. After dinner, she accidentally stumbled upon her brother and his betrothed in a rather intimate moment. Embarrassed, she retreated to her cabin to sleep. As she lay in bed, she began to imagine the wedding, picturing everyone dancing to the music. With her eyes closed, she envisioned gray eyes looking back at her, and she imagined herself dancing as well. Meanwhile, aboard the ship in Lannisport, the year was 294 AC. The Red Viper struggled to rise from his bed, but leaving Ilaria was even more challenging. She lay there, naked, and as he gazed at her, he felt a strong urge to wake her once more. Instead, he quietly dressed and made his way to the deck. Obara leaned against the mast, her expression bored as Sarella pointed out the stars. Nym stood in the corner, engaged in conversation with one of the guards, while Tyene was nowhere to be seen. If we could just learn to read them, we'd be able to sail anywhere, Sarella said, pointing to one of the formations. We can already sail where we wish, Obara replied, her voice dripping with disinterest. We cannot sail west, daughter, Oberyn chimed in, smirking at Sarella as he made his presence known. We could, though, Sarella insisted. He smiled at her, always curious if anyone could find the way, it would be her. I wish to speak to you all. Nym, come here. Where's Tyene? He asked. With Demon, Obara said, scrunching up her face in disgust. Sarella, find your sister. It took a few moments, but when Sarella arrived on deck with Demon, both were still adjusting their clothing. Demon shot a warning glance at his former squire before breaking into laughter. Dismissing the men from the deck, he turned to speak to his children, gesturing for Demon to stay too. We're heading into the lion's den, and we must be careful. Behave well and give them no reason to suspect anything is amiss. Why, father? They are Lannisters, Nym said, shaking her head. They are, and their time will come. But I seek a larger foe, one I've waited a lifetime for. Will it be slow, father? Tyene asked, her voice bubbling with glee. He will suffer greatly. See what you can find on the other one, but discreetly, my children. I can allow him to walk this earth a little longer, but the mountain falls soon. For Elia, for Rhaenys, for Aegon, the girls said in unison. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken, Oberyn replied, and they nodded in agreement. He walked away but called Demon to follow. As he headed back to Ilaria, he turned to his former squire and playfully clipped him on the ear, smiling as he did so. When I said to watch my daughters, that wasn't what I meant, he said, laughing. I tried, my prince, Demon replied, chuckling as well. Keep an eye on them when we arrive, Demon, especially Obara. We can't be asked to leave. Of course, my prince. And with that, he departed. He left her there and returned to his room. As he undressed, he heard Ilaria moan, "Come back to bed, my love." He turned to see her lying on her side, her legs slightly parted, and he felt himself captivated. He was just a man, he thought, as he climbed on top of her. The next day, all thoughts of taking their time to dress and leave were dashed when Demon knocked to inform him about a welcome party, which included a Lannister. Oberyn sighed before getting dressed. As he and Ilaria walked to the deck to look down, he spotted one of the Lannister brothers, Kevin, he thought, along with the imp himself. Walking down the gangplank, with his daughters behind him and Demon resting a hand on his sword, Oberyn wrapped his arm around Ilaria, pulling her tightly to him. Look, my love, Lord Jaime must value us, for he sent his own brother, the imp, to greet us. Noticing a slight grimace on the other Lannister's face, he smirked, even as the dwarf maintained a composed expression. I do prefer Tyrion, Prince Oberyn, the dwarf said, smiling back at him. May I present my own paramour, Ilaria Sand. He watched, expecting disapproval, but was pleasantly surprised by the imp's greeting. Lady Ilaria, I bid you welcome to Lannisport, Tyrion said, and Oberyn could see the sincerity in his smile. I thank you for the welcome, Lord Tyrion. We've organized accommodations suited to your station, Prince Oberyn. If you'd care to follow. Oberyn had intended to find the most luxurious brothel and take up residence there, but his curiosity about what the Lannisters considered suitable got the better of him, so he nodded and followed. They walked down the street to where a carriage and horses awaited. He, along with Ilaria, Tyene, and Sarella, climbed into the carriage with Tyrion while the rest of his party took the offered horses. What brings you to Lannisport, Prince Oberyn? Tyrion asked, getting straight to the point. Oberyn smiled at his directness. I wish to speak. Perhaps I can help? Oberyn offered. Do you speak for your brother, Lord Tyrion? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Do you speak for yours? Tyrion replied, laughing heartily at the dwarf. On this I do, but not on much else. It didn't take them long to reach the house they had been given, and Oberyn was pleasantly surprised by its luxury. It wasn't that the Lannisters lacked the gold for such opulence, but rather that they were offering it to him. As he walked alongside Ilaria, he noticed her delight, especially at the sight of the large sunken bath. She winked at him when she spotted it. I thank you, my lord. This will do just fine, Oberyn said. Of course, Prince Oberyn. Should you wish to attend, we would like to throw you a fitting welcome at Casterly Rock, perhaps the day after tomorrow? Tyrion suggested. I would like to see the rock once again. It's been many years since I set foot there. You visited the rock? Tyrion asked, intrigued. Not long after you were born, my sister and I came. I wanted to see the monster they spoke of, but alas, I found only a boy, a rather small boy, though not everywhere, Oberyn said, chuckling. Well, what I lack in height. Tyrion began. You make up for in other areas, Ilaria interjected, and Oberyn joined in her laughter. Indeed. As for entertainment, I'd recommend seeing Alice at the Yellow Dawn. Tell her you're my guest, and I'm sure she'll find something to keep you occupied, Tyrion advised. Oberyn nodded. For now, I shall take my leave. It's good to see you here, Prince Oberyn, Lady Ilaria, truly. What a strange little man, Ilaria remarked after Tyrion left. Far friendlier than I expected, Oberyn replied, turning to her. Shall we try this Yellow Dawn, my love? I prefer to try this bath, she said, letting her dress slip from her shoulders. A few days later, it was almost a week later when they received their visitor, and Oberyn nearly choked on his wine as he. Oberyn looked at a familiar face from the past. Sir Richard Lonmouth appeared well and healthy, which was quite a feat for a man who was supposed to be dead. How he had managed to get past the guards was something to worry about later. For now, he had nothing to fear from Richard. Perhaps, though, the man could provide answers to questions that had lingered in Oberyn's mind ever since the letter and the head arrived in Sunspear. Sir Richard, I heard you were dead, Oberyn said. I thought I was dead too, until I found out it was just that I was in the Crownlands, Richard replied, laughing. Ah, as witty as ever. What brings you back from the dead, Richard? Call it justice, call it vengeance, call it whatever you wish. I'm here because some crimes need to be paid for, and paid for in blood. Oberyn rose from his chair, realizing this was the man who had sent the letter. He looked into Richard's eyes and saw the truth of it there. Why now? I'm in a position to help. So shall we discuss how we're going to take down the mountain? We should, but he's mine, Richard. No one else's. He's mine. For Elia, Richard said with a nod. For Elia, Oberyn replied. In Lannisport, 294 AC, Richard Lonmouth had heard from one of his spies about a Dornishman arriving on a northern ship, which piqued his interest. Had Oberyn sent someone ahead? Was this Doran's doing? He needed to investigate. As he entered the room, he was glad he had come himself. How Arthur had survived would no doubt become a tale of its own. But here he was, in the flesh, and if he was here for what Richard hoped, his king had suddenly become much safer. I heard you died, old friend, Richard said as he took a seat. You too, Arthur replied, looking at him. No, I just wanted to. I know how that feels. What brings you here, Arthur? I should ask you the same question, Richard, Arthur said, meeting his gaze. I'm here on the king's business, the true king, he quickly added, noticing the brief flash of anger on Arthur's face. Who is he? I have Arthur. You're looking at Jaehaerys Targaryen's Master of Whisperers, Richard replied, and Arthur laughed. At least he knows loyalty. He does. Arthur, are you here for what I hope? Richard asked, looking at the famed knight. I came to see him, to see for myself. I need to know if he's Rhaegar or Aerys. He's his father's son, Arthur. There's no doubt about that, Richard said, noticing the smile spreading across Arthur's face. What is he like, Richard? Smart, honest, loyal. He's a good lad, Arthur. He'll be a great man and an even better king. You've heard about the trade deals, right? I heard. They were his ideas. He's already improved the North, and given time, he'll do the same for the rest of the realm. What about the Lannisters? As far as I know, they're fully behind him. Jaime is, anyway. The Kingslayer, Arthur said, a note of disgust creeping into his voice. Careful, Arthur. I don't know what happened with Jaime Lannister, but I know the king won't tolerate anyone speaking poorly of him. If you force him to choose, he won't choose you. How do you know this? He told me. He considers Jaime his most loyal supporter, and I believe him. You do? I do. I've checked, Arthur. He treats Jaime like a son, and Jaime sees him as a father figure. Given everything, I think he's changed. Arthur nodded. Whether he was convinced would become clear later, but he hoped he had. Having Arthur with the king would give them even more legitimacy, but more than that, he was the best protector Richard could have. He has Barristan on his side too, Arthur. He does? Arthur asked, surprised. Yes, that's who brought me in and pointed me in the right direction. When will they be back, Richard? Another moon, I think. Not really sure. You heard about Jaime's wedding, right? What? He married a girl from the north. They'll be having another wedding when they return. So that's why. Oberyn is coming, Richard said. Not exactly, Arthur replied, curious about what Richard had in mind. Richard began to outline his plans for Oberyn and the Mountain, explaining how they would seek justice for Elia. He spoke of Varys, detailing why he felt it necessary to kill him and the role Varys played in the grand scheme of things. Once Richard finished, Arthur shared his own story, which was as wondrous as Richard had imagined. He spoke of red priests, secret journeys to uncover artifacts, and the prince that was promised. A smile crept across his face as he recalled Rhaegar discussing the prophecy. He had long thought it was a relic of the past and intended to keep it far from the king, but the artifacts intrigued him. Rocks, books, a mysterious chest, Valyrian steel. Did you find anything else, Arthur? Maybe a dragon or two? Richard laughed. I don't know, they show you things, visions, Arthur replied. Visions? Richard asked, intrigued. Arthur recounted the vision he had experienced, the lion protecting the wolf as it grew, clearly representing Jaime Lannister. The man in the white cloak was Arthur himself, being accepted by both the White Wolf and the White Dragon, who must be his king. As for the army and the flames, perhaps they symbolized his quest for the throne. You know he has a wolf, right? Richard inquired. I heard. A tame wolf? Who's ever heard of such a thing? Arthur chuckled. A dire wolf, Arthur. A dire wolf, Richard corrected him. You jest? Arthur replied, raising an eyebrow. No, it's true. I saw it myself, larger than any wolf I've ever heard of, with white fur and red eyes. They then reminisced about old times, reflecting on their fallen prince. They drank together, careful not to get drunk, and Richard urged Arthur to gather his things before taking him back to his residence. Arthur needed to stay out of sight, and where better to hide than with a man who thrived in the shadows? The next day, they sparred, and Arthur was soundly defeated. Richard was no slouch with a blade, but only Barristan or Jaime could match Arthur, and he had no doubt they would eventually fall as well. After waiting a week for Oberyn's arrival, Arthur made contact with the prince, setting their plan into motion. He suggested that Oberyn stay for the wedding. Although he wasn't sure if the king would want to speak with the Viper, it was better to seize the opportunity before Oberyn left for Dorne. After their conversation, he made his way to Casterly Rock, arriving as a traitor from Essos. He sought and received a meeting with Tyrion. "I wondered when you'd show up," Tyrion said, settling into his seat across from him. "Well, you knew I would come. Besides, we have plans to make. We have a mountain to trap." "And how are we going to do that?" Tyrion asked, intrigued. "We're going to use a snake, Tyrion, a very dangerous one."